here's our warm-up. It's a review from the last lesson that we did. This was the lesson on our PEMDAS, our order of operations. So, I want to start this problem, and let's look at this. What is the first part of this problem I'm going to address, Hannah?
You have to do
What's in the parentheses? Excellent. Here's our parentheses. 25 times 2 is, Lucy? 50, exactly. I like to kind of just cross it out and write it just so I don't have to think about it. Now, what's the next thing I have to do, Rocco?
the exponent.
Exponent. Our exponent is here. A lot of people forget this, and it's gotten frustrating to see on homework because I see you guys getting it in the first half, and then the second half, it just slips out of your brain. When we write our exponent, we're writing our factor however many times. That little number appears, the power appears. So we write 4 times 4. A lot of you guys start adding for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. So don't add those together. 4 times 4 equals, yeah, we can say it all together, 16. Excellent. Once again, I'm just going to cross that off and write 16. Now, what's the next step I have to do? Let's see, Oleg. Perfect. I have to divide 96 by 16 because we're following PEMDAS. And that's the next step. What is 96 divided by 16, Lucy? 6. So then I cross this whole thing out because I don't want it. And now I've got 6. Now what do I do? Who can tell me what I do? It's pretty straightforward here, Liam. Add it to 6 to 50 becomes 56. Then I have the minus 15 minus 3. It's our last step. We can just do those. It becomes, what's our answer, Adriana? 38. Great job. So this is lesson 6.3. It's on variables and expressions. We've already dealt with variables. Who can tell me an example of a variable? Just give me an example of a variable, Hannah. X. Anybody else have an example of a variable? Let's see. Rafi. Y. Anybody else? Let's see, Daniel. A. Miles. M. What's not an example of a variable? Who can tell me what's not an example? I want to see Anita. 2. What's not one, Ben? 3. What's not one, Nathan?
4.
4. Look at this. It's super easy. We all know already before even opening our book what variables are and what they are not. So in your book on page 449, I want you to fill out that little chart and then close your book so I know that we're ready to go on. For our examples, we already listed some. For examples of variables, we have X, Y, Z, A, B, C, any sort of thing like that. In fact, a variable could be a star. It could be a heart. It could be a smiley face. Basically, anything that's not a number. Non-examples would be 3, 6, negative 10, 1/2. Basically, anything that is a number, 0.75. You know, you see this? Any of those are not variables. So, the math meaning of a variable, what's a good example? Give me one, Hannah.
A placeholder for an unknown number.
That's a great one. That is great. So, it's a placeholder. In fact, that leads us directly into our lesson. So, it's a placeholder for an unknown value. That's great. That's supposed to be a U. So it's a placeholder for an unknown value, which is excellent. You could say it's also a symbol, usually a letter, but sometimes it can be any sort of symbol to represent an unknown number. We don't know that number yet. So if I asked you, Adriana, what is X? What's the number of X? You don't know it. We don't have a number for X yet. And the point is because it's going to change. Now, what about the everyday meaning? Who can tell me an everyday meaning? Let's see, Rocco. Yeah, so we would say that it varies. It changes. So the everyday meaning is that it varies and that it changes. I want you to write this top part in your notebook. So algebraic expressions. An algebraic expression contains at least one variable and at least one operation. So all 3 of these mean the exact same thing. When we see that multiplication dot, it means multiply. When we see something touching the parentheses, It means multiply. That's our distributive property, which we're going to go over later. And when we see something directly touching, it means multiply. So when we see any of those, if something's directly touching a variable, something's got a dot between the variable, or it's directly touching the parentheses, all of them mean the same thing. It all means multiply. It all means 5 multiplied by x. So solve if b equals 25. Here we have 16 plus b. What do I do, Michelle? Yeah, it becomes 16 plus 25 because all I do is I plug in b. So what is 16 plus 25? Who can tell me? Raising our hands. Romario. It's what? 41. Second one. Solve if x equals 64 and y equals 27. All we do is follow those same steps. So Hannah, what do I plug in for x?
For x, you plug in 64.
X I plug in 64. What do I plug in for y, Malia? 27. And so what do I get as my answer then? Let's see, Fernando. 27, or 37 I mean. Yes, I couldn't hear you. 37. Now, this one, again, 6x if x is equal to 1/2. So Ben, what do I do?
You multiply 6 times 1/2.
Yeah, I plug in the 1/2 for x. They're touching directly, and because they're touching, he knows it means multiply. So I have 6 times 1/2. We can make it 6 over 1 times 1 over 2, which is equal to 6 over 2, which is equal to 3. Excellent. So this is how we do it. We plug in the matching values directly. We just plug them straight into the problem. I want you to go to page 450, just where we were, and do problems A through D. If you complete those, I want you to do E, F, and G. I like to color code things because it makes it easier for me to see visually. It makes it easier for me to see. So, A, what is A equal to, Rocco? 6. What's 6 plus 8, Elsie? It is 14. Here, we have A minus B. What is A, Hannah? A is 6. What is B, Rocco? So what is the answer, Andrew? 2. Here I've got A times B. We know A is 6, B is 4. So what is the answer, Lucy? 24. And then we have 9C. That means 9 times C. What is C, Ben? C is 1/3. So we have 9 times 1/3. For a lot of people, it becomes easier if you make them both into fractions and then multiply across. You would get 9 over 3. Remember, that sign, this part right here, means divide. Notice how those little things. So what's 9 divided by 3 equal to? Number of fingers? 3. Excellent. So let's look at this other one. We're going to do these together if you hadn't already done it. So, Romario, what is D equal to? D is equal to 12. It's touching that too, so what does that mean I do to it? What do I do to it, Nathan? Multiply. What is 2 times 12, Hannah?
2 times 12 is
24. And then I've got that minus 5. What does that make it, Daniel? 19. This next one, 50 minus 3D. Once again, D is 12. 3D, that means we're multiplying. They're touching. What is 3 times 12, Lucy? 36. What's 50 minus 36, Anita? 14. Lastly, 9e squared. This one some of you might have had a little trouble with. I hope you didn't. Now, let's break it down. We're going to plug it in, okay? We've got 9. Then we're going to multiply it by that 1/3. But before we do that, we have to square that 1/3. So if I square that 1/3, I'm going to write it out as 1/3 times 1/3. It's very important that you do the squaring first. You have to do the squaring first. It's exponents. What is 1/3 times 1/3, Hannah? 1/9. We just multiplied straight across. We get 1/9. What's 9 times 1/9? Who can tell me 9 times 1/9? Do we know? Let's see. Ben. 9 times 1/9.
1/9.
Not 1/9. What is it, Oswaldo?
It's 181.
Oswaldo is correct. It is 1 because we get 9 over 1 times 1 over 9. That gives us 9 over 9, which is indeed 1. So, we're going to do number 9 on the homework together. A paper recycling bin has the dimensions shown. Use the expression S cubed, where S is the length of a side, to find the volume of a bin. So if S means side, what is the length of my side? What is the length of my side, Jaden? The length of the side is 1/2. And as Jaden said, because it is S cubed, that's not a 5, because it is S cubed and S itself is equal to 1/2, it just becomes 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. What is 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, Adriana? 1/8. So the answer is literally 1/8, but we would write it meters cubed. That's just all we would write. Number 11 is a little tricky. Let's look. Julian earns $13.50 per hour. His company deducts 23% of his pay each week for taxes. Julian uses the expression 0.77 times 13.50H to compute his earnings after taxes for the hours, which is H, that he works. So what will be his earnings after taxes if he works for 40 hours? So 40 hours, what am I plugging in for hours? What am I plugging in for hours? You can tell me, Hannah? I am plugging in H for hours, but what is H equal to? Lucy? 40. I plug it in. I want to ask you guys a separate question, though. Why is this here 0.77? Why is it 0.77? Does anybody know? Fernando? Yes, it's that 23% that got taken out. Remember, 23% as a decimal, we move it over those 2 spots. And if he's taking away that 23%, it's 1 minus 0.23, which is equal to 0.77. So that's how we got that 0.77 for this first part of the problem. I assigned it because it gave you the entire equation, but I also am glad that we brought it up because I want you to know why we have that 0.77 there. It says 40 hours, so for hours, aka H, we plug in 40. Simple as that. Thank you for watching this episode. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, merch below, everybody.